Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf lamed tet in Masechet Zevachim. Let me share my screen and we will get started. So yesterday, uh, actually, we'll go back even further than that. In the opening Mishnah of this, we're now in the fourth chapter of Zevachim. We saw that Hillel says that when it comes to a sin offering, now, what do you have to do with we've already learned, we learned at the very beginning of Zvachim that there are four steps, four blood-related steps to bringing an offering. First, you slaughter the animal. Then you receive the blood, the lifeblood of that animal that it shoots out after the slaughtering has happened, and you receive it in a special vessel from the Beis Hamikdash, a Kli Shares. Then you take, so that's step two is receiving the blood. Step three is you take the blood to the altar. Step four is you place the blood, or you throw the blood, or you sprinkle the blood on the altar. In connection with the sin offering, the altar had four slightly raised areas in the four corners. We refer to those as horns, the horns of the altar. And the Torah tells us that you put from the blood with your finger, a Kohen would do this with your finger, from that blood on each of the four corners. And what Hillel said in the opening Mishnah of our chapter is that only one of those, once you do one of them, the person has received atonement. You're still required to do all four, but as long as you do one, the atonement is achieved, and that's relevant for us with respect to other aspects of whether or not of what has to happen with respect to those four placements of blood. And so the other three, like I said, are required, but the failure to do them does not in any way invalidate the chatat and prevent the owner from achieving atonement. So at the end of the day yesterday, we learned that Rav Papa noted that these three additional applications have 8 similarities with essential applications and 4 differences. Meaning, with the original essential application, you have to do it in a certain way, and 8 ways it's like the last 3 applications on the last 3 horns of the altar are like that first one in 8 ways, and they're different in 4 ways. Okay, and 4 differences where the 3 additional applications are treated more like the remnant blood that is spilled at the base of the altar, which if you don't do, it's okay. You're supposed to do it, but you don't have to do it. So what were the 8 things? So here are the 8 items. Okay, so first of all, you can't bring it outside. These are the 8 similarities that just like the first application, which is mandatory and necessary in order to accomplish atonement, the last 3 have these rules as well. So all 4 of the applications of the blood, you can't bring them outside the Beis Hamikdash. You cannot do them at night. You cannot do them if you're not a Kohen. You cannot do them without a sacred vessel. You cannot do them, you do them by applying the blood to the horn of the altar. You can't do it elsewhere. You do it with the Kohen's finger. And if in fact any blood the blood were to splash onto the garment before the application was complete, well then that blood needs to be washed off inside the azara, inside the courtyard. And finally, this was the one that we were talking about at the end yesterday, and I answered a question on the WhatsApp group associated with it as well. Finally, any blood that is left after any of those applications are made is considered remnant blood that needs to be spilled at the base of the altar. Again, if you don't do it, it's not doesn't prevent the atonement from working, but you're supposed to do it. And the key point is that if you were to use, obviously, if you use one container, one Kli Shares for all 4 of the applications, well, then there's no real practical difference. It doesn't make a difference because it's all whatever is going to be left from the first one is going to be left from the fourth one. Meaning when you're done with all four applications, it's the remnants of both the first one and the fourth one. It's the same container. But if you were to imagine somebody were to receive the blood in container number one, then quickly pass that to another Kohen, then receive it some more blood in container number two and pass it to a Kohen three, and pass it to a Kohen four, and pass it to a Kohen. So now we've got four different containers, and from each of those containers, we now put some of the blood on one of the corners. So we put some of the blood from container number one on corner number one, and so on. Now, in that case, you have four containers with remnant blood. All of that blood needs to be poured at the base of the altar. I might have thought, well, listen, only the first application is required, is absolutely essential for the atonement. So maybe only that one needs to have its blood poured at the base of the altar. And the answer is no, all four have to apply. And so those were the 8 areas where it's all like the initial application. All four applications are treated the same. Then there were 4 that are different. And I realize that I'm missing the number 1 in the second sub-bullet point on the screen, but I'll try and remember to put it in. So first is death of the owner. If the owner dies before the first application, everything gets destroyed. You have the entire sacrifice doesn't work. You can't offer a sin offering. You can't burn the sin offering. You can't do anything with the sin offering. You can't eat the sin offering if the owner dies before atonement is achieved. On the other hand, once that first application is applied and the atonement is achieved, the other 3 applications can be made even after the death of the owner because the owner has already achieved atonement. So as a result, it's not treated as a chatas for which the owner has died. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the last 3 applications don't actually permit anything. And Rashi tells us that it's because they're all the carbon is already permitted to be eaten by the Kohanim, because we're talking about a sin offering, and a sin offering is only eaten by the Kohanim, and a personal sin offering, a sin offering by a private individual, is only eaten by the Kohanim. And so that they can eat it as soon as the first application is made. And if you think about eating or bringing the sacrifice on the altar sometime after the right time, that is not going to be pigul when you do it for the last 3, because the last 3 applications aren't necessary. And pigul only happens when you do something that's absolutely necessary. And although if you were to bring the blood of the sin offering into the heichal, into the kodesh, you would make that sin offering invalid. That only applies to the blood of the first placement. Once that blood has been placed there, if the Kohen were to then walk into the heichal forgetting that he was holding the rest of the blood, totally okay. Not totally okay, but it's all right. He can still apply the rest of the blood. It doesn't actually invalidate the sacrifice. And in that regard, it's just like the remnants of blood. And so all 4 of these are the last 3 applications are treated just like they were remnants. So again, one of the similarities to the initial application is that if the blood got on the Kohen's garments, they must be washed inside the courtyard. And so as we pick up on the 11th line from the bottom of Lamed Chet Amabet, Rav Papa explains how he knows that the blood for the 3 additional applications would trigger a garment washing requirement. So Rav Papa says, Amar Rav Papa minan minala. How do I know this? Ditanan, because it says in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that we'll learn in a couple of maybe 2 months or so, a little bit under 2 months, on Daf Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph. Nitaz min hatzavar al habeged. If the blood splattered from the neck onto the garment, eino ton kibus, it's not going to require the washing, because the washing needs to be blood that's available for sprinkling. Min hakeren umin hayesod. If, on the other hand, after you put it on the horns of the Mizbeach, or after you put it on the altar of the on the base of the altar of the Mizbeach, well, then again, Eino ton kibus. It doesn't require washing. What's the implication? Ha min haroi lekeren ton kibus. What does require washing? If it was ready, if it was in the klishares and about to be put on the altar, and then you sloshed it around and it sprinkled on your garment, that's what would require washing of the garment inside the azara. One second though, ulatamech, what was your reasoning? Your reasoning was that if it mina keren, that when it says from the horn, it means after you put it on the horn and not the stuff that is fit for the horn. And the stuff that is fit for the horn would require washing. So too, let's say that when it says min hayesod einaton kibus, when it says that when it comes from the base of the altar, it doesn't require washing, then let's say that it means hamina royli yesod ton kibus. We could make the same argument that if it's fit for the yesod, meaning that if it's the shirayim, if it's the leftover blood, well then that would go on the base of the altar, and when it's ready to go on the base of the altar and then splashes on the person's clothing, well then the clothing needs to be washed. So asher yizeksiv, but it specifically talks about blood is going to sprinkle on the garment. Prat lezeh shekvar huza, but that excludes the blood that is going to be already sprinkled. So this reading, Rav Papa, that you are suggesting doesn't work in this Mishnah, because the Mishnah the Mishnah seems to suggest something that isn't true, using the same logic that you're applying to the words mina keren. If you apply that logic to min yesod, it's going to mean something that isn't actually true. So Hamani, Rabbi Nechemia, so you're going to tell me now. I will note that by the end of today, we will provide an alternative explanation of this Mishnah that is consistent with Rav Papa. Mm-hmm. But for right now, we're going to say, who is the author of our Mishnah? It must be Rabbi Nechemia, because what does Rabbi Nechemia say? Detanan, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Shiarei Hadam Shekrivan Bachotz Chayab, because he says that if you take any remnant blood outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you're liable, even though it's not a service that is in any way required. If you didn't do it, it's going to be an okay thing. Nonetheless, Rabbi Nechemia says that if you bring the blood outside the temple, you'll be liable. And the implication of that is, let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi, Hamani Rabbi Nechemia, it's the second to last of the medium wide lines in Rashi at the bottom. Ham milsa hashas kamar. The Gemara. This is something that the Gemara is going to ask. La umaskana de kusyanhi. This reference to Hamani Rabbi Nechemia is the end of the question, because the point is la fuki mid Rav Papa, that what we're saying is that this doesn't work with Rav Papa, because Rav Papa is citing this Mishnah to suggest that it implies that if you were to get blood on your garment before the sprinkling, it would require washing, and that it's true not only for the mandatory putting of the blood on the altar, but also for the other three applications. Kolomar meha lo area taima didach. And the point is the Gemara is saying this doesn't actually fit with you, because the ha Rabbi Nechemia, it's Rabbi Nechemia. He's a yachid. He's not the general. We don't paskin like Rabbi Nechemia. Dafilu b'shirayim nami ton kibus. He would require washing even with respect to the leftover blood, not just the blood that needs to be sprinkled. And continuing on the next Rashi, Shairei Hadam, Af Shel Chatos Hachitzonos, even the leftover blood of sin offerings that are brought outside of the that are brought outside the kodesh, that are brought on the main altar, shekrivan b'chutz chayiv, you'd still be liable for them. Alma dam kachashav lahu. What it's holding is considered real blood of the sacrifice, and it's not considered leftover stuff yet because it's going to trigger an obligation for you to wash your garment. So bottom line is that we need to say that this is actually going to it doesn't work. It doesn't prove Rav Papa's point, because Rav Papa is saying that everybody would agree to this according to him. But Amar deshamat le Rabbi Nechemia. 1 second, le'inyan ha'ala. Maybe when it says that Rabbi Nechemia says that the rest of the blood, if you bring it outside, it's going to cause you to be liable for leaving the Beis Hamikdash. But maybe that doesn't mean the sprinkling is going to be requiring, if the blood gets on the garment, it's going to require washing. Because maybe we could say, le'inyan ha'ala, when it comes to taking it out of the outside the Beis Hamikdash, midi dahavi aivarim ufdarim. It's like the limbs and the fats, which you have, which you're also liable if you bring them outside the Beis Hamikdash. But le'inyan kibus mi shamat like, maybe Rabbi Nechemia doesn't think that you have to wash the garment. No, he does think that you have to wash the garment, because Vatanya, we've got a brisa that shows that that Rabbi Nechemia thinks this. Damim hateunim yisod. When it comes to what does the brisa say? It says that blood that requires application on the base of the altar, teunim kibus, it also triggers a washing requirement. Umachshava moelis behen. And if you think a pigul thought, if you think about doing some other step outside the regular time, you're going to turn the whole korban into pigul. And if you take it outside the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be liable. So we see that this is we're going to, as the Gemara is about to tell us, it says that one who offers it outside the Beis Hamikdash is going to be liable. Who is it that says that with respect to the leftover blood? That's Rabbi Nechemia. So this brisa must be Rabbi Nechemia, and it says that it requires washing. The damim nishpachim la'ama. However, when it comes to the blood that's poured into the canal, there was a path for water that flowed through the Beis Hamikdash, and you could, and certain blood that was not didn't have any kind of holiness could just be let to go down in the canal and be washed away. Ein ton and kibus. That blood doesn't trigger washing. And if you do something with it, with that blood, and you then have a thought about eating the korban outside the regular time, or burning the sacrifice outside the regular time, it doesn't create pigul, because that's not part of the service. And if you take that blood outside the temple, you're also not going to be liable. So man shamas, so that's the end of the brisa. So man shamas like the amar ma'ala mehen b'chutz chayiv. Who is it that says that if you take some of the remnant blood outside the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be liable? Rabbi Nechemia. That's Rabbi Nechemia. V'ka amar, and that same brisa says tan kibus, you need washing. So 1 second though. Umachshava mo'elis behen. But 1 second, this brisa that we are now interpreting as referring to the shirayim blood, the remnant blood, that after you've done all of the sprinkling, it can't be that blood is what we're talking about, because does that blood really become pigul if you have a thought about a pigul thought while you're doing something with it? But Tanya, we have another brisa, Yatsu Shirayim, that when it comes to the concept of pigul, you can exclude the remnant blood, B'haktaras Emurim, and the burning of the sacrificial parts, She'ein Ma'akvin Es HaKapara, because those things aren't necessary for atonement. Again, remember, the 4 things that are necessary for the atonement are slaughtering the animal, receiving the blood, bringing the blood to the altar, and putting the blood on the altar. But when it comes to burning the sacrificial parts and and pouring the remnant blood on the base of the altar, those aren't one of the four items. So they're not necessary for atonement. And so if you were to think while you're doing them that you were going to do something that you shouldn't be doing with this sacrifice, like eating it outside the regular time or burning it outside the regular time, that's not going to make it pigul. She'ein makshava moelas behen. Piggle thoughts aren't effective during the work of those services. So kitanya. So as a result, we need to say, so kitanya hahi. So when are we referring to? What are we referring to in that brisa? Bishlosh matanos shebachatas. It must be referring to the three unnecessary applications of the sin offering. And that's what when we say damim hateunim yisod, we're referring to the three non-essential applications of the chatas. And so therefore, it's exactly what this Rabbi Nehemiah is saying exactly what Rav Papa said, but the problem is it's Rabbi Nehemiah. It's not the position of everybody. And so again, this is not the proof for Rav Huna, for Rav Papa has fallen by the wayside. But ihachi te'un yesod. But so in second though, the Brisa didn't say that you need to the Brisa didn't say that we're talking about the blood that requires sprinkling. The Brisa said that we're talking about the blood that needs to be poured on the base. So how can you say that it's referring to the blood of the three additional applications that aren't required? Lekeren Azle, that doesn't go on the horns. So Ema nit anin yisod. So we are going to reread that brisa and say what it refers to is it's the blood that would be required to be put on the base of the base of the altar. And so the blood that is being sprinkled on the last three horns of the altar after you finish the sprinkling, it requires pouring on the base of the altar. And so that's what we're referring to. Or second, and you're going to tell me that if you think a piggle thought during these last three applications that it's going to actually cause something to be piggle? Hamart, we said before, in fact, Rav Papa himself said, Lo Sharya, Lo Velo Mefalga, Velo Aile Legave Lekasofan. That when it comes to those last three applications, they don't make any meat permitted, and they don't create piggle if you have a piggle thought, and you can't and if they come inside the heichal, then it's okay. You can still do them because it's just like shirayim. So Ella kitanya hahi b'dam hampnimim. So we're gonna reread this brisa completely. It's not talking about the blood of a regular sin offering. It's talking about the blood of an offering, of a sin offering that is brought where the blood is put on the altar inside the Kodesh, on the golden altar, on the inner altar. That's the kind of situation that we're talking about. But what would be the law about the blood that would be put on the outer altar? And, so then patur, it would be exempt. And so in second, when this brisa references as a contrast to the blood that is going to go on the base of the altar or and require washing and trigger pigul, and if you bring them outside the base of Migdash, it's going to be liable. That we contrasted that to blood that goes in the canal, where it's not going to trigger any of those three things. Liflog v'litnei b'dida. Why differentiate between blood that goes on the yesod that we ordinarily would put on the inner altar and blood that goes in the canal? Why not say oh no, what we can distinguish between is blood from sacrifices that go on the inner altar and blood that goes on sacrifices in the outer altar. Liflog v'litnin b'dida. We should talk about other sin offerings that have blood go on the altar, that are supposed to have their remnant blood be poured on the base of the altar. So bamed dvarim amurim, and the point would be is what we would say in this brisa is, what are we talking about where we say that if you require washing, and if you have a pigul intent, it makes it pigul, and if you bring it outside the base of mikdash, you're liable, is where the blood is blood from a sacrifice that is supposed to be sprinkled on the inner altar. And when you're not liable is when you're going to do it for a sacrifice that's put where the blood is required to be put on the outer altar. So let's make that distinction. But when it comes to the blood that goes to the outer altar, patur, we'll say that it's patur. So why not make that distinction in this brisa? So no, we don't make that distinction because Hamani Rabbi Nechemyahi. This brisa is Rabbi Nechemya. And what did we say a few moments ago that Rabbi Nechemya says? The Amar Shairei Hadam Shakrivan B'chutz Chayav. Because he says, you know what? Even the blood of a sin offering that you're only supposed to sprinkle the blood outside on the outer altar, namely that would be, for example, the personal sin offering, as opposed to the major communal sin offerings where the blood is sprinkled on the inner altar. On those, even the blood of a personal sin offering, if that blood is brought outside the temple, the person is going to be liable. And so as a result, v'lo mitnei tlasa peture lebahade tlasa chayuvi. So as a result, we couldn't make the distinction between inner altar and outer altar blood. Because when it comes to even the outer altar blood, even that blood, according to Rabbi Nechemya, if you bring it outside the Beis HaMikdash and you offer it outside the Beis HaMikdash, you're going to be liable. And so the goal here was to mention something where you have three different aspects of liability in one case and zero aspects of liability in the other case. But if we were to talk about inner and outer, you would still have on the outer one aspect of liability, namely you can't bring it outside and offer it outside the Beis HaMikdash. So that's why the brisa specifically talks about putting the blood in the canal, because the blood that goes in the canal does have all three don't apply. If it gets on your clothing, you don't have to wash it in the azara. If you have a pigul intent, it won't make the sacrifice pigul. And if you bring it outside and offer it outside the Beis HaMikdash, you won't be liable. So that's why we refer to all three of those cases. Okay, so now we've explained the brisa and explained why all of this is a potential problem for Rav Papa, because at the end of the day, Rav Papa was citing this Mishnah and the related brisa, citing this Mishnah for the point that washing of blood, that if the blood of the last three applications gets on your garment, you're going to need to wash it in the azara. And right now, we've shown that that is the opinion only of Rabbi Nechemya. It's not a general opinion, it's a das yachid. And so we're still stuck, with the question on Rav Papa. So that's our current situation. And so now the Gemara returns to the question of how we can read that, it should say Mishnah here, cited earlier by Rav Papa, the Mishnah that's on Lamed Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph of Maseches, of this Maseches, of Zevachim. And again, because we said that the Gemara implied that it could not support him because the author of that Mishnah is, clearly believed that even remnant blood before it was poured at the base of the altar could cause a washing obligation. And the Gemara offers a different read of that Mishnah that is consistent with Rav Papa's lesson. So Ravina Amar min hakeren mamish, that what did that Mishnah say? Again, I apologize that I wrote Brisa on the screen, but it should say Mishnah. What did that Brisa say? What did that Mishnah say? Excuse me. That Mishnah said that if nitas min hatzavar ala beged, if it goes from the neck directly on the garment, eino ton kibus. It doesn't require washing. Min hakeren, if it comes from the horn of the altar, umin hayesod, and from the base of the altar, eino ton kibus. It doesn't require washing. And how have we explained it? We've explained that both min hakeren and min hayesod mean basically it went on the corner or it went on the base, and then it splashed onto the person's garment. Oh. And we say in that situation, you don't need to wash it inside the azara because the application was already completed. So that's how we've understood it. But Ravina says, min hakeren mamish. Yes, that is the right way to understand min hakeren. Min hakeren means as soon as you put it on the corner, then if it goes on the garment, it's going to be okay. But min hayesod, min haroy liyesod. But when it says when we refer to things that are going to go on the base of the altar, we don't mean that it goes from the base of the altar and then splashes on the garment. We mean the blood that is ready to go on the base of the altar, meaning the shirayim, meaning the remnant blood. And so as a result, Amrle Rav Tach, 1 second. So, and as a result, the point is that our concern that we had about that Mishnah, that doesn't it imply something that Rav Papa doesn't agree to, is no, it doesn't apply. So it doesn't imply something that Rav Papa doesn't agree to. That the point is that Rav Papa says that when it comes to Shirayim, that blood won't require kibus, and it's only the blood that you're about to put on each of the four corners, only that blood requires kibus. And if it comes from one of the corners, then you're done. It's not going to require kibus either. And so now this Mishnah is completely consistent with Rav Papa. And so Amarle Rav Tachlifa Bar Gaza Ravina. So Rav Tachlifa says, Ema Edi Ve'idi Roihu. How do you know? You're telling me that when we talk about the blood that goes on the corner, it means after you put it on the corner. But when it goes to blood that goes on the base, it means before you go put it on the base. Maybe both bloods should be before. It should be the blood that you're ready to put on the corner and the blood that you're ready to put on the base. And then what would we be saying? The only blood that would trigger a washing requirement is the blood that you put on the first corner. And after you put it on the first corner, for the last three corners, any of that blood would not be a problem. So how do you know that that's not what it's saying? Well, hi, my. 1 second. Hashta roy lekeren amart lo roy liyasod mi boy. But 1 second. If you tell me that the blood that is fit to be put on the last three corners of the altar will not trigger a washing requirement, then you don't need to tell me that the blood that you're supposed to put on the base is not going to require a washing requirement. That blood is even a lower level of blood than the blood that's going to go on the other three corners, because the blood that is going to go on the base is just that blood that was going to go on the other three corners minus the blood that you put on those corners. So it's the same kind of blood. So it doesn't work. So as a result, Ella mina karen mamish, mina yesod, mina royal yesod. So it has to mean that when we say that we're going to have it from the horn, it means that it already was on the horn. And when we say that it means from the base, it means that which is fit for the base. And so as a result, this Mishnah that we cite on Tzaddik Gimel Amud Aleph is in fact a valid support for Rav Papa's point, that namely that for all four applications, if the blood goes on the person's garment before they make the application, meaning it comes directly from the Kli Shares, or while he's putting the blood onto the altar, some of it sprinkles on his garment. That garment is going to be need to be washed in the Azara. Okay, so that finishes our discussion of how many applications are required. And now the Gemara turns to the next piece of our Mishnah, which notes that all the applications of blood done on the inner altar are essential. Again, on the outer altar, we had the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says one is necessary, only one application is necessary for all sacrifices. And so we'll just give that opinion. I guess might as well give Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says that one is required for all sacrifices except for a sin offering, which requires two. But everybody agrees that when it comes to sacrifices where the blood is applied to the inner altar, it requires all the applications that the Torah mentions. So all the applications are required. So kol hanitanin al mizbeach hapanimi, all of the applications that are applied to the inner altar, the Mishnah then continues to say, are required. So we now cite a long brisa that supports this conclusion and provides the basis for reaching it. Tanu Rabbanan. The pasuk the rabbis taught in a brisa. This is now citing a pasuk Vayikra Dalid pasuk Kaf. This is a pasuk about the Par Ha'elam Davar. This brings us back to Hariot. Remember, the Par Ha'elam Davar is the bull that is offered if the Beit Din, if the Sanhedrin makes an improper ruling and a majority of the community follows that ruling, we're going to have a Par Ha'elam Davar. So asa, and it says that he's going to do it, kasher asa, and he's going to do it just as he had done, just as he would do, meaning he's going to do the bull offering as a sacrifice for the Par Ha'elam Davar, for having the community having sinned, just like on the other sin offerings. So ma ba'al lilmod, what does this all come to teach us? Meaning, why refer back to the other offerings? Lichpol bahazato. It's the repetition is to tell us about the sprinklings. V'limed she'im chiser achas mikol hamatanos lo asa v'lo klum. That if you do it, if you fail to do any of the sprinklings, it's going to be a problem, and it's going to be as if you didn't do the whole thing. You did nothing if you don't do all of the sprinklings. So ainli elamat on sheva. So what is it referencing back to as he had done? It refers back to the to the other inner sin offerings. And so that's the other sin offerings where there are multiple sprinklings required on the inner altar. And so now ainli elash matan sheva. So that would tell me that maybe only when I have to do the 7 applications, and what Rashi tells us what the 7 applications are. Take a look in Rashi, second 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of the Rashi. Matan Sheva ala parochas, to the 7 applications towards the curtain. Shema kavot, that they are necessary and required. B'kol makom, they are always necessary for every sacrifice. And l'kamim farsh, tomorrow we'll explain the source of why that is. But the bottom line is that we'll see that at the beginning of tomorrow's daf. But so that's the story. So the point is that applies to the 7 applications. Meaning, okay, so then the brisa continues. Matan arba minayan. How do I know that when it comes to the 4 applications on the altar, that on the 4 corners of the altar? So how do I know that those are also going to be absolutely necessary? And if you don't do them, it's as if you did nothing. Talmud Lomar, Kain Yaseh, meaning the pasuk says, V'asisa lapar kasher asa. First, it refers to just like I did lapara chatas, for the other sin offering, for the other bull sin offering. Kain yaseh lo. But now it doesn't need to say Kain yaseh lo. So the fact that it says Kain yaseh, Talmud Lomar, even not only the sprinkling, the 7 sprinklings, but even the 4 placements of the blood on the corners of the mizbeach, of the corner of the inner mizbeach, those also are going to be required. Lapar, it says the word lapar in that pasuk, right? The asa lapar. So zepar Yom Kippurim. This shows that not only is it true for the bull of the communal sin offering, but also for the bull of Yom Kippur, that is also going to require all of these, both the 7 sprinklings and the 4 blood applications. Kasher asalapar, and then it repeats again, right? It says vasa lapar, and then kasher asa lipar. So why does it do that? Zepar Kohen HaMashiach. That the same rules that apply to this bull offering from Yom Kippur would apply to not only not only do the bull application, the blood applications that apply to the bull on Yom Kippur apply to the par elam davar, to the communal offering if the Sanhedrin makes a mistake, but they also apply to the bull to the communal Yom Kippur bull offering, and they apply to the bull offering if the Kohen makes a mistake. Hachatas elu sirei avodas kochavim. These are the goats that you offer if the community engages in idolatry because of some mistaken ruling by the Sanhedrin. Because again, the mistaken ruling of the Sanhedrin only relates to non-idolatry things. If there's idolatry, then it's a different kind of korban. So as a result, so now we've got all the different kinds of inner sacrifices. For all of them, they're all covered now, and we have both the apple requirement for the sprinkling 7 times, and we have towards the parochet, and we have the requirement that they have to have all 4 corners, have the blood applied to all 4 corners, and if you fail to do any one of any of those things, then it's not going to be a valid sacrifice. So Yachol Sha'ani Marbe Af Sirei Harigalim Usirei Rashi Chodashim. Well, 1 second. There are other goats that maybe we could include. We could include the special goats. This is a Daf Yomi coincidence because, of course, today is Rosh Chodesh. So maybe it should include the goats of the holidays and the goats of Rosh Chodesh, even though those are offered on the outer altar. Maybe those also should have blood applied to the inner altar, and they should be burned outside of Yerushalayim, just like the inner altar sacrifices are all burned outside, and none of it goes to the Kohanim. Talmud Lomar, lo. No, the fact that we have one limitation in this pasuk. It says, V'asa lapar kasher asa lapar achatas ken yaseh lo. Lo comes to exclude that, as Rashi says, Talmud Lomar ken yaseh lo, lezeh v'lo lacher. It limits it. The exclusionary phrase comes to exclude the festival and the Rosh Chodesh Chatas offerings from being inner offerings. Those are not done on the inner altar. They are done only on the outer altar. Okay, but Umar Re'isul Larabo says, Elu Hotzias Elu. Why are you including all the other, the goats for the idolatry and not the goats of the holidays and Rosh Chodesh? So Acher Shariba Kasav Acher Shariba Kasav Umiye. Well, once the pasuk tells us that we have something to include and something to exclude, Miraba Ani as Elu Shemachaprin Alaveris Mitzvah Yedua. I'm going to include the communal sacrifices with respect to idolatry because they come to deal with a specific sin, namely idolatry. Umotzi ani elu, and I'm going to exclude the other ones, namely the holidays and Rosh Chodesh, she'ein mechaperin al averos mitzvah yedua, because they do not come to address a specific sin. So as a result, that's why we did that. And the Brisa now continues. V'chiper, the pasuk again says, "V'asisa leparach hasher hasa leparach chatas ken yaseh lo v'chiper." That's the next word in the pasuk, and it'll atone, provide atonement. Afal pi shelo samach. Even though you didn't do smicha, because the word v'chiper implies no matter what. As Rashi says, first wide line at the bottom of Lamed Tet Bet, v'chiper mikol makom. No matter what, you're going to get the atonement. So what is the no matter what? It means even if you didn't do smicha. V'nislach, and you will be forgiven. Again, that's the a couple words later in the pasuk. It says the end of the pasuk is v'chiper alehem hakohen v'nislach lahem. They will be forgiven. Af al pi shalom nasan shirayim. Even if you didn't put the blood of the shirayim out on the base on the outer altar. So again, this is the main source for the position, the majority position, which is the position that even the shirayim blood of inner altar sacrifices doesn't need to be poured. If you don't do it, it doesn't prevent the sacrifice from working. Umari salifso bahazos lahakshir besmichas v'shirayim. Well, one second. What we now, if we take a look at this pasuk in general, what we've said is that you have to do the sprinklings and the applications of the blood, but you don't have to do, meaning the sacrifice will still be kosher if you don't do the smicha and the pouring of the remnant blood. Amart posel ani bahazos. Maybe right? So maybe we could say the exact opposite. Let's allow the sacrifices to happen even if you don't do the sprinklings, and we'll say that what the whole point of making it connected to other things is to say that you have to do the smicha and the pouring of the remnants. So no, Amar posal ani bahazos. No, the reason that we're going to say that the sprinklings are required is because every sacrifice requires at least one sprinkling. So we're going to make this sacrifices, these inner sacrifices, have all the sprinklings. And when it comes to the doing smicha and pouring the remnant blood on the base of the altar, well, those we don't need to do now. We can do, those are not required with respect to every other sacrifice, and so we can say that they're not required with respect to these sacrifices as well. So this brings us to the top of Mem Amud Aleph, and now, having quoted this long Brisa, the Gemara now is going to begin, and the first half of tomorrow will be analyzing different quotes of that Brisa, but for that you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Well, that was
That was
complicated.
intense.
Yes.
That was
That was a lot.
complicated.
A lot of blood and very complicated. Yes. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. But that the key logic, the key point right now is that we are connecting. The pasuk effectively is used to connect all the inner altar sacrifices, to say that for all the inner altar sacrifices, you have to do all of the blood applications. And so that's the key thing that to take away from this Brisa. And again, we'll be looking at that Brisa in more detail, God willing, tomorrow.
It's not the outer altar.
Correct. All this, the Brisa that we've just been citing is all about the fact that everything's required for the inner altar, except for smicha. If you don't do smicha, that's okay. And if you don't do the sprinkling, if you don't pour the shirayim, the remnant blood, on the base of the outer altar, again, even though you don't pour that, even though the sacrifices, all the work is done on the inner altar, all the pouring of the remnant blood, even for those inner altar sacrifices, happens at the outer altar, but and that is not required. So although everything, almost everything is required for and is essential. And if you don't do it, it's as if you did nothing for the inner altar sacrifices. But the pouring of the blood and doing smicha on the animal, those are not absolutely required. Now, again, we saw earlier that there is an opinion that says that the pouring of the blood on the base of the outer altar for the sacrifices that are brought on the inner altar is required. We saw that yesterday, but that is not a position that is referenced in this brisa.
Well, wouldn't the blood, the shirayim, the mizbeach apnimi be poured on the base of the mizbeach apnimi?
That's what you would have thought, but that is not the case. The remnant blood, it makes sense on some level because you don't want to pour a whole lot of blood inside the kodesh. That blood is effectively almost effectively trash. I mean, it's essentially the leftover blood. And so the answer to the question is no, that even though the rest of the sacrifice is dealt with on the inner altar, the remnant blood, the shirayim, is poured on the outer altar. It's a little confusing. Again, one of the many aspects of confusion that can come up in this discussion.
So how do they carry the blood out then? Are you allowed to carry the
Yeah,
blood
yeah.
from
Well,
the
the blood,
inner
remember, the
altar to the
blood,
outer altar?
yeah, the blood is then carried from remember,
In a
all in a
cliche?
kli race. It's in the kli race, and then you take it to the outer altar, and you're going to pour it on the base of the outer altar, right next to the ramp.
I keep thinking of the Mishnayot that we have in our Siddur that we read every morning.
Yes, well, we're going to. That's next parak. Next parak. It's very exciting. We're gonna get the chance to do that. So, it may be, I haven't double checked this, but my understanding is the only chapter in Mishnayos that has no machlokas. So we'll see. We'll get the chance to see that. Even though in the Gemara there are, I believe, are machlokot about various aspects of the rules, and we may not even paskin like all of those mishnayos that we saw. I think we saw that during the course of our studying of Maseches Psachim together. I remember that specifically because it was a shock to me. But yeah, looking forward to doing that parak because it's hopefully will deepen our understanding of the mishnayos that many of us read every day.
The very first Mishnah in Brakot, the established halacha about when you have to say the evening Shema. The Gemara disagrees, and we paskin according to the Bavli.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Although the Yerushalmi disagrees with the Bavli there and says the halacha is like the Mishnah.
Which aspect of it remind us?
The Yerushalmi says you really do have to say the Shema by Chatzot.
By Chatzot Halayla.
Yes, Chatzot Halayla.
Got it. So yeah, 100%. I'm thinking mostly of the timing of the start times, not of the finish times. But you're absolutely right that we definitely paskin that you can do it all night. So, all right. Well, looking forward to continuing our learning together, and again, looking forward so tomorrow again we'll be looking at this brisa in greater detail. Thanks so much.